Hey everyone, Minutia Minute coming at you guys on another beautiful day. It's the perfect day to find out what happened this month in Batman. Okay, so first read of the day was Batman 108, introducing Miracle Molly. There's also a sly reference to Dr. Chase Meridian from Batman Forever, which I thought was kind of amusing. So we're now into part 3 of the Cowardly Lot. Batman's delving into the Unsane gang as matches Malone, although Miracle Molly kind of sees right through that. We are starting to see some of these disparate story threads kind of coming together now. So we find out how the Unsanity Collective is related to the Magistrate. We're getting a little bit clearer sense of what's happening with the Magistrate and just getting closer into that sort of RoboCop world that we seem to be headed towards. Also, speaking of the world, like, I'm actually really enjoying this take on Gotham City. It's very like cyberpunk. Actually, it's like Batman in a cyberpunk future. I think it's actually really cool and feels a little bit different. Definitely turning away from the gothic Gotham that we've seen for decades. So if you feel like Batman doesn't do anything different, I would disagree. We're introducing a lot of great, interesting new characters, reinventing Gotham City and the dynamic of the government and its people, and it's good stuff. Like, I'm legit liking it. There's also a backup story here around the Ghostmaker, and I read through it and realized I had no idea what happened in the last round of Ghostmaker. I just don't think I paid that close of attention to it when I read it before, and I probably will need to go back and reread it because I couldn't really make heads or tails of what was going on in this particular issue. So anyway, Batman 108 definitely gets a thumbs up from me. Really enjoying it. Definitely starting to see how things are going to start building towards this big Halloween event coming up soon. Go check it out. All right, next up is Batman the Detective, 2 of 6. Still loving the art on this. One of the things I said about this last month was I enjoyed the idea that it's kind of Frank Miller's Batman, but set in a story that would be kind of a Denny O'Neil, Neil Adams type story. We continue that here. One of the things I like about the characterization in Batman is they kind of take the piss out of the Frank Millerisms. So Squire has kind of a fun role to play in this. Just kind of poke in at Batman's stoic anger. We also get to spend a little bit more time with our villains, and starting to get a little bit more sense of what they're like, although we still don't really know what makes them tick. And we change locations. So I was kind of surprised. One thing I would say I was disappointed about with this is if, Batman the Detective is all about traipsing around Europe, we really didn't spend that much time in London before heading off to Paris, which is where this one kind of concludes. We do get an appearance here with Henry Ducard, which is kind of interesting. I won't flip any further as to avoid spoilers, but he definitely has a part to play in issue 2, and based on the ending, I found myself wondering, is this in continuity or is this not? I was just kind of wondering because some couple pretty big moments happen towards the end. It's all just still kind of starting to develop. It's moving kind of slow. Curious to see what issue 3 brings, but I enjoyed this issue overall, and if nothing else, the art is fantastic. Okay, next up we got Batman Urban Legends. 4 glorious Gotham sagas featuring Red Hood, Grifter, The Outsiders, and Lady Shiva. I have to say this cover is one of the lamest covers I've ever seen and owned. But how are the stories? I'm not going to talk about all of them. I think Grifter's continuing to be good. The Chip Zdarsky Red Hood story I thought was interesting, is continuing to develop. The standout story this week for me actually was the Lady Shiva kind of one-shot story. And maybe it's just because I just finished reading the Cassandra Cain Batgirl 73 issues, because it does kind of create a nice little coda having just read that. But it was also cool just because it gave us a little bit of a sense of like what Bruce Wayne's life is like. He's out fighting crime, he comes home, now he lives in Gotham City proper, he has to make sure the windows are closed because he has neighbors now. There's no Alfred around, and he's just kind of living a different life. And it's nice to actually get to decompress and see him do that. One of my complaints from some of the other Batman stories is they've set up this new status quo, but you don't really get to actually kind of relish in it. And this story actually kind of gave us the chance at that, which was neat. Otherwise, it was an okay read. This is still honestly a little bit of a slog to get through, but now that The Outsiders is over, which did make sense now that it's finally concluded, I kind of got where they were going for more. But now that it's over, I'm kind of excited to see what comes next in issue 4. Hopefully get another story in there that's a little bit more exciting for me. Okay, now we're cooking with gas. Catwoman 31. So when I first started picking up Catwoman, it was part of me reading all the Infinite Frontier books, and probably wouldn't have picked it up otherwise. I've never really picked up Catwoman before, and I was pleasantly surprised by it. I thought it had a lot of promise. I thought Ram V's storytelling was really good. I thought Fernando Blanco's art was excellent, and with every single issue, I find myself liking it more and more. So this one is basically Catwoman explaining to her Mark how she managed to recover Poison Ivy. So in the last issue, Poison Ivy basically had been taken by this rich guy who had her in display in his mansion, and she's going to break Ivy out. And the whole thing is sort of post-breakout, her explaining to him how she got away with it. So it's this great caper, like classic Catwoman, and with Fernando Blanco's art, giving it that kind of noir flair, it just made it a really, really fun read. This is a standout for me every single month. This is one of the ones that I look forward to the most. So I said last month, like, I just don't hear anybody talking about this book. And, I'm not going to say it's, like, the best book ever, but if you just want a fun DC book set in the Batman universe, you really can't go wrong with Catwoman. So I would recommend checking it out if you are so inclined. The other thing about this that I almost forgot to mention is the Simon Saint storyline running in the main Batman title does circle back into this story now, as it's wrapping up in its final few pages, done in an interesting way that really feels organic to building the larger Batman narrative. One of the problems with reading all the Batman titles is it doesn't feel like they all fit together particularly well, at least not currently. They'll deal with Batman in the same timeline, in the same Gotham, in the same universe, but it's hard to know when things are taking place, whereas this book really feels like it fits into the main Batman story going on in the flagship title. All right, Detective Comics. So what can I say about Detective Comics? Another book with great art, this one by Dan Mora. If Batman is all about the cyberpunk future Gotham universe, this is very much just a typical Batman detective story. So in this, he's investigating the murder of Mary Worth, who is the daughter of a major crime lord / construction mogul of Gotham, Roland Worth. And it's definitely intriguing. We have Lady Clayface introduced in here, which is kind of interesting. Hard to kind of see where that's going to go, but she clearly seems to have witnessed something. There's a lot of discussion about, is this a serial killer or is there something more going on here? Something that's not just random. And the main thing that was really fun about this particular issue is that Detective Comics, in my opinion, is really doing the idea of the backup story right, which in the last issue, Huntress ends up starting to investigate a murder of a friend of hers, which leads her to the same case that Batman is working on, which then intersects with the main story of this issue, which was nice. That's exactly the kind of thing I like to see in backup stories. It just kind of helps flesh out the main story and really makes it feel more worthwhile to have those extra pages because it really adds something. One thing I'll say about DC right now, and especially Batman, is, we've got Cassandra Cain back, we've got Huntress, we've got Oracle, we've got, every Bat character under the sun. It's starting to feel a little bit like the X-Men, where, it's just endless numbers of former Bat characters. As much as, it's sad when a Cassandra Cain goes away. or a spoiler gets killed off, that it's inevitable. Like, you need to kind of purge, and so that you can focus on the characters you want to focus on, and you don't have to pay service to absolutely everybody. That's when you find yourselves getting in the weeds, and that's why it doesn't really bother me that much where death is like a cheap solution in comics, because characters can always come back. But it's really just a way of editorial to be able to focus on the characters they want to tell stories about, and then they can always reintroduce them later if they want. Like, I don't really have a problem with that. And current DC, where everything is in continuity and all of these characters sort of exist simultaneously, definitely feels a little bit crowded. But that said, I did like Huntress in this. It's a fun read, definitely worth taking a look at. I've never read anything by Mariko Tamaki before, but this is good. Like, I have no worries with this. Always looking forward to reading it. Funny story, I am still reading Harley Quinn, and I really gotta stop. So the first issue of this was kind of a pleasant surprise, only because everything else that week really didn't do it for me. And when I picked up issue 2, it was just, I don't know. I think the number one thing that's off-putting for me is the art. I really find Riley Rossmo's art, at least in this, extremely distasteful. I hate the way they draw Hugo Strange in this with his just bean head. And there's an element that's like, it just kind of reeks of drawn on an iPad. Which, I mean, I guess whatever art you choose, however you choose to do your art is fine. But this just doesn't transcend digital media into print. Like, I almost wonder if this would look better if I was reading it digitally. But as it is, it just comes off unfinished to me. There's one, like, there's a lot of kind of lost lines that just feel kind of haphazard. There's one section in here, where is it? Like, here is a good example. Like, it just doesn't look right to me. I can't even really put my finger on it, because I get that it's supposed to be cartoony, but it really feels like this. Like, this to me looks sloppy more than it does like artistic, like an artistic choice. It looks sloppy and rushed. That's just my opinion. Sorry if you love Riley Rossmo and I'm just dissing the art. I apologize. It's just not for me. I really need to drop this book. As far as the plot, like, we just keep moseying around the idea that, Hugo Strange and Harley Quinn are kind of like rival psychiatrists. And that's kind of it. Honestly, like, that's a good idea for a book, but we're just going nowhere. We're 3 issues in, and we're still circling around what was going on kind of in the first issue. So this is a pass for me. I wouldn't recommend Harley Quinn. I really need to consider dropping it. I just keep lingering on it, trying to give it time, because I think Stephanie Phillips is a good writer, even though the art for me is just a non-starter. Joker is a title I was very excited for this month. Joker number 2 had a great cliffhanger, revealing the Court of Owls situation lingering in the background. We introduced this new Bane. I can't remember if that was in issue 1 or 2. Issue 3, I have to say, was kind of a bust. Mostly because pretty much the whole thing was voiceover from Jim Gordon. Just kind of being inside of his head. And him reckoning with everything that's happened so far. We have a short scene here where he hops on the airplane, but for the most part, it's really just him ruminating on the events that are about to unfold. As you can see, I mean, just like several pages of just basically hard-boiled voiceover as events take place. I will say this has a lot of promise, because all of these different factions that are interested in where the Joker is and want to get to him all kind of reach ahead as the story is concluding. So my guess is issue 4 is going to go out with quite the bang. But for issue 3, it just needed a little bit more. There just wasn't quite enough story here for me. I will skip ahead here to the end, where we get to spend some time with the Punchline story. The art on this wasn't quite as strong as the last couple of issues for some reason to me. I'm not quite sure why. It just didn't strike me. It was just a little flat, as you can see, kind of with the fight with Orca here. It's just lacking in detail. But basically, Harper Row has tracked down this old schoolmate of Punchline who is ready, possibly, to turn over a new leaf and destroy all this material that Punchline has used to sort of win over Gotham. I don't really want to say too much more than that because it's only a few pages long and I don't want to spoil it if you're not reading it. I don't want to spoil it if you haven't read it yet, but regardless, this was a solid read. It left me really excited to see what happens next. This book being $5.99 really hurts the overall value proposition, but the Punchline story is good. The Joker story has been good, and if you are reading it, I'd certainly continue. This just isn't the one you want to hop on with. This is one that probably is going to be best as a big trade. Like, I can't imagine this story is going to run forever. Like, I feel like it's going to be like 12 issues and then it's probably going to be done, unless they're really going to shoot for the fences and really focus more on Joker and not Jim Gordon. And that might be the time to actually pick this up and read it. The Punchline stuff, I think, is more fun month to month, but for $5.99 alone, it's hard to really justify that price tag. Okay, so I know a few of you are wondering what I thought of Legends of the Dark Knight. I just finished it. And this book is a riot. I really enjoyed this a lot. Derek Robertson on Batman. That is a combination. And I don't know if he's ever drawn Batman before. If he has, point me to his work because I would love to dig into it more. The only thing I really know is, when he was on The Boys back in the day. But this is a really, really fun read. Nothing too deep, but just feels very like 90s Batman. Just all about the big broad villains, big broad story, and it's not about Gotham politics, it's not about social stratification. It's, even Mr. Freeze in this looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger. And of course, that's what Freeze looked like in the comics in the late 90s too. So like, just a really, really entertaining read. If I had a complaint about this, it's that the story's told from the point of view of this cop right here, who's kind of relaying to Jim Gordon what Batman's been doing. Look at that art, by the way. Fantastic. And, if it's Legends of the Dark Knight, it seems like they're kind of going for that, this is how other people see Batman when they relay the stories. And so every story is going to have kind of a different flavor based on the person who's telling the story. That wasn't really how Legends of the Dark Knight worked, the original series, and I just don't think it's sustainable if this is going to be an ongoing run. Like, I think that's a cool way to start. I just don't want them to feel hamstrung to that idea for every single story that they do, because even in the context of this story in and of itself, like, this guy's telling the story, but you better believe that when it's appropriate, you hop in and get, Batman sharing his perspective of the narrative as well. So like, even this book isn't really following its own rules because the sergeant doesn't know what Batman's thinking, yet we, the reader, do. So, but all told, again, this is just a super fun read. I would definitely recommend this to anybody. It's a great way to hop on, read some Batman without being too tied into what's currently going on. You can just kind of enjoy it for what it is. Okay, penultimate issue. Nightwing number 80. We are getting deeper into this Heartless storyline where someone is cutting the hearts out of homeless people in Gotham City. This is another really fun read. So a big part of it for me in this is Bruno Redondo's art. I really think his art is fantastic. I like how it's colored, and I like the use of like the comic book like microdots or whatever they are. They're just, in my opinion, very artistically applied, and they don't draw attention to themselves. This is kind of a great little moment here too, the overview of the apartment. I like that. And it just gives it, a comic book feel without it being overt and over the top and overused. So really, really enjoyable. This has got a lot of fun banter between Tim Drake, Nightwing and Oracle. We get to continue the path of, we get to continue learning about how Nightwing is going to spend his newfound fortune. He's obviously a very altruistic person and wants to put the money to good use. I will say I'm having a little bit of trouble figuring out. They do kind of bring up the blockbuster element of the story that was introduced in 78 or 79. I'm not quite sure how all of this is going to tie together, but I'm definitely along for the ride. Some great action here towards the end. I really love the layout of this and the little sort of instruction manual moment here with Nightwing and Robin. That's great stuff. But yeah, great read. Look how colorful that is. This is wonderful. Really like Nightwing right now. Nightwing 80 is definitely one not to be missed. If you haven't read up to this point, you could actually probably hop on with this book and basically know what's going on. And if you haven't picked it up yet, great opportunity to. Okay, last but certainly not least is Robin number 2. So if you feel like they put out a lot of Bat books, let me tell you, sitting down and reading 10 of them in a row basically is an entire day. And I'm exhausted. However, we are ending on a high note here. So in issue number 2, we get to learn a little bit more about the rules of the island, the Lazarus Island that they're on. Turns out that they are allowed to die 3 times, and if they die a 3rd time, they die forever. So in case you were wondering if this was going to be Mortal Kombat, it literally is a video game. That might kind of sound off-putting, but I mean it in the best way possible. The art in this is cartoony and fun. It isn't necessarily quite as good as the first issue. There were a couple spots that felt just a little bit sloppy to me, but even so, it does its job. This book is really going to be a fun way to kind of explore Damian Wayne's hothead personality. They really are playing into that, but doing it in a way that's a little bit more interesting than things they've done in the past. Since he's not playing off stoic, angry Batman, it just gives it a different frame of mind and just really freshens up the concept of Damian Wayne to me. As you can see on this page, like, we're introducing like a lot of the different contestants in the tournament, which all get their, fun character moments and, the larger than life identification as is it Ravager? Ravager is explaining them to Damian Wayne. There's another character that is in this that I don't want to spoil it for you, so I'm actually going to go ahead and close it up, but definitely something that DC fans will enjoy. So yeah, good book, good read, another recommend for me. So with all of these books finally reviewed here, the question is, what were my books of the month? I'm going to go with 3. However, I do want to throw out a couple of honorable mentions. Honorable mention number 1 is Batman 108. This is just kind of an in-between issue. Things are kind of building up. We spend a lot of time with Matches Malone. Miracle Molly is an interesting character. The Unsane Gang is interesting. I really like where this book is headed. There wasn't enough content in this because it was kind of an in-between setup issue to really make it like a, wow, this is my book of the month. But it was a good read, and I'm always excited to see what James Tynion's doing next in the main Batman title. Next runner-up, I was kind of certain this was going to be in the top 3, but it didn't quite make it, is Robin number 2. This is one I just definitely recommend you pick up. It's just light, fun. If you're not the biggest Damian Wayne fan, I would still recommend giving it a try, because like I said, like, putting him in the framework of this sort of Mortal Kombat tournament with these other teenagers and him having to learn how to kind of loosen up fits his character well. In some ways, it kind of reminds me of the early days when he was paired up with Dick Grayson as Batman, because you had a similar dynamic where, it wasn't Damian Wayne paired up with dark brooding Batman. It was Damian Wayne who's sort of dark and edgy but like trying too hard, with someone who's a little lighter and will kind of take the piss out of him, which Dick Grayson could do. I kind of get vibes of that with Robin. So if you're not reading Robin and you don't like Damian Wayne, maybe still give this one a shot, because it's really a good time. So without further ado, what are my top 3 books of the month? First up, number 3 is Legends of the Dark Knight. This is just good, old school Batman fun. A big part of it is the artwork by Derek Robertson. I mean, it's just unmatched. Like, I really enjoyed his artwork in this. It almost has a Brian Boland kind of a vibe to it, but just a little bit more cartoony. The way he draws the Joker, the Penguin, Mr. Freeze, it's all just great stuff. Batman hanging off a helicopter is fun. It's just a great read. I can't wait for issue 2 on this. Runner-up book of the month is Nightwing number 80. Again, largely because of the artwork. I just really like Bruno Redondo's art style. He's someone I feel like who has just developed a lot in his years since I first became familiar with him. His work in Injustice was good, but it certainly wasn't like, wow, Bruno Redondo, this just stands out. And getting to see Nightwing and Tim Drake together again, bouncing off with Oracle, having kind of a fun fight with some goons that work for Blockbuster, just made for a really entertaining read. I'm really excited to find out more about who this Heartless character is and what he's really up to. So that just leaves one more book. What was my book of the month? Another book that was just fun. Catwoman 31 by Ram V and Fernando Blanco. Again, great art. Kind of a noir style. This cover art does not do justice to the art that's inside the book to me, because the interior art just has a little bit more of that kind of Gotham Central quality to it that I really, really like, and really fits this story, because ultimately you're getting a Catwoman story that's actually a heist, and it's all about figuring out how she did it and her explaining it to her mark. I just thought that was a great context for how to take the story into the next place, and I really like the development of how they're gonna combine Poison Ivy and Catwoman. I'm hoping Riddler gets to come back as we continue the story forward, but all told, just a really fun read, super underrated book in my opinion. Go check it out. So with that, those are my Batman thoughts for the month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys had a great week in comics, and have a good one.